You lied to me. You said there'd be no recall. That scared the living daylights out of me.
So that's an old railway track.
It's a bit,
piece of an old railway track. Very good.
I think as far as I know, it's a bit of Killala railway track.
Railway track. Just as well they closed the railway down, isn't it?
But I was looking recently there from 1700, the records, 17 something, 47 wrecks in this bay.
47?
Yeah.
Back in the days of sailing ships necessarily?
Yeah.
Do you want to see if our pistol will work?
I think I'll let you do the pistol just in case. The 22nd of August 1798 was the eve of a bright harvest day, we're told. It was also the birthday of a certain Frenchman called Jean-Joseph Humbert, who had reached the age of 31. Now, I don't know how most young men celebrated their birthdays back in those days, but General Humbert, as we've come to know him, celebrated his by invading Ireland. He was at the head of an expeditionary force of 1,019 troops, and he had come in support of the rebellion of the United Irishman. In military terms, he was quite successful at first, and after a few victories was able to declare the province of Connacht a republic. But the truth of the matter was, he had arrived too late. The rising had already been put down elsewhere in the country. He was massively outnumbered by the English forces and soon had to surrender. Nonetheless, his exploits in this area are still referred to, over 2 centuries later, as the Year of the French. And the place where he first set foot on Irish soil has become almost synonymous with his ill-fated heroics. Welcome to Killala Bay in the north of County Mayo. The anglers wandering the bed of the River Mayo in the town of Ballina are hoping to encounter Atlantic salmon that have recently entered the river via Killala Bay. Both behaviours, the salmon migrating, the anglers fishing, have been going on in some form or another for countless generations. So you can say with some degree of confidence that distant ancestors of those salmon would have been making the same journey back in the 5th century, when St. Patrick was establishing his church at what would become the village of Killala on the western shore of the bay. And you can also be sure that they were still passing along their watery highway some 700 years later when the round tower was erected, and again in the late 17th century when the Church of Ireland Cathedral broke the horizon. The salmon have seen human populations ebb and flow over the millennia along this stretch of coastline, so might not have paid too much attention when 3 larger than usual shadows loomed over their heads just off Kilcommon Harbour on an August day in the year 1798. These were the hulls of 3 frigates carrying General Humbert's expeditionary force, which had arrived via Ireland's back door, so to speak, under English flags, which were lowered when the ships dropped anchor. Kilcommon was, and still is, a tiny fishing harbour, and Humbert's army was also comparatively tiny. But the story of their triumphs and failures over the next couple of weeks, the rout of the English forces at the so-called Castlebar races, the disastrous defeat at Ballinamuck, and the last stand of the rebels at Killala village itself, has acquired almost mythic status in Irish folklore, and has provided rich material for historians, novelists, filmmakers, dramatists, and of course songwriters. Steve Dunford could fit a number of those descriptions, in that he's not only written about the Year of the French, he relives it year after year in elaborate reenactments wherein redcoats, French invaders, United Irishmen, and pike-wielding volunteers confront each other in the very places where those events occurred. In order to do so, he has had to acquire accurate and detailed knowledge of the events he is depicting.
On the 22nd of August is St. Brendan's Day, so it was a fair day. So the people came from the fair nearby in Rathfran, and they were lining the land behind us here. So there was a bit of a reception committee for them.
And it would have been a welcoming reception?
It would have been a welcoming reception, yeah.
Right. We have a rock here,
we have,
right?
Yeah.
It's prized in its own plinth up here.
Absolutely.
And this is supposed, I'm going to say alleged, no, you're going to correct me.
I am
right?
going to correct you.
This is the rock at which it's alleged that Humbert first stood on Irish soil.
Absolutely.
Is that really true?
No, that is true, because they had a similar rock for Nappertandy in Donegal, which they lost. Now, I don't know how you lose a rock but they did lose it.
Right.
That is it. No, it's documented. That is the one. And it was taken from the shore in 1898 for the centenary of the rebellion, and it was used as a sort of a tourist attraction.
Yeah, you could see why it was tempting for somebody to stand on top of it. You know, you can picture this sort of vainglorious young man, and he's putting one foot up on the top of the wee.
And he's got all
it looks like a
It does actually. It does.
resplendent uniform and all the rest of it.
And he was the second man ashore.
So he struck a pose.
Struck a pose, and there's a lovely story, folkloric story told that when he came ashore, that of that crowd of people who had been at the fair, that a guy steps out and takes a whistle out of his pocket and plays a tune called Paul Jean O'Rafferty, and that Humbert is supposed to have acknowledged it by doffing his hat. Don't know whether it's true or not, but it's a nice...
wee myths could grow up around an occasion like that.
Yeah. Now, there was a reception committee of 150 United Irishmen here. There were at least two blacksmiths actively making pikes in Killala at the time. Mayo was ready. Roscommon was ready. I mean, Matthew Tone, who was Wolfe Tone's brother, was on board the ship with Humbert, and he left, his diary saying, we're ready. James Plunkett in Roscommon has 3,500 men. We're going to, the country is going to rise, and it did rise, but it didn't rise in conjunction with it.
Was, of course, that it had already risen all over the rest of the country and been put down. Would they have been aware? I mean, you know how we have instant news these days, but they would have been aware of what was like.
Because a strange thing about this whole 1798 rebellion is that it was Masonic driven, and this is what people don't get. So a lot of the high-ranking members of the United Irishman were Freemasons, so they got the word across the country on the lodge system. Right. And the password for Killala, when the French landed at Killala, was Killala, your friends are at Killala. And it went from Killala.
Word of mouth mostly.
Word of mouth,
right. I mean, the outcome of it all, for Humbert himself and for a lot of his soldiers, I mean, they were prisoners of war and they were traded off.
Yes,
so he was repatriated and eventually had a career in America, as we know.
Yep.
But for the ordinary Irish here, it wasn't a very pleasant prospect at all.
I often think, and not anyway disparaging to the ordinary pikemen and things like that, but you had a lot of people like the Blakes and O'Dowdas who were very well-to-do and very wealthy Irish landowners. They had an awful lot to lose and they lost it. And they threw their lot in with Humbert, Like they lost their lands and God knows,
Well, hundreds lost their lives.
Oh, they did.
Course,
and these guys lost their lives as well.
Yes.
There's a lovely round figure of 600 that keeps cropping up. There were 600 butchered in... There were 600 butchered when they came... That's a lovely little round-up figure, They have no idea because, as happened in Ulster, when they came back here, they had to teach the people a lesson.
Yeah.
It was horrible. War is horrible. There's nothing glamorous about it.
Okay.
And while we do reenactments, and while one, if not two, of my own ancestors took part in that.
Really?
Oh yes,
really?
yeah. And I often wonder, because I don't know what happened to them. They were ordinary people, ordinary pikemen,
So that's the other aspect of it. I mean, you're an example of it yourself, but there are people living all around here now who are direct descendants of those men.
From pikemen, United Irishmen, redcoats.
Redcoats as well.
Redcoats as well.
Right,
yeah, absolutely.
That's the other side of the coin.
That's the other side of the coin. That quite a lot of the British Army in Ireland at the time were militia. So they were local men. Now they didn't have the local militias in their own areas. So, for example, we had the Kilkenny militia here and the Longford militia. The Mayo militia were down south.
Same applies to the police, really, doesn't it? don't police your own community. In other words,
exactly.
Right. Steve sometimes jokingly styles himself General Dunford. But in truth, he would actually need to exercise a general's command on occasion, as when he brings hundreds of like-minded reenactors onto the streets of Mayo and elsewhere to demonstrate some of the realities of 18th century warfare. Steve refers to this as living history, and it's certainly a step up from gazing at relics in a glass case in a museum. But for people like me who never really grew up, it's an excuse to dress up and indulge a few childhood fantasies. Steve's a Frenchman, by the way, and I'm an officer, no less, of the United Irishman. And people dressed just like us would have marched across the enchanting Kilcommon Strand at Lacken Bay on that shining harvest day back in August 1798.
The wadding and everything went down.
Okay.
No, sir.
And you want to load mine as well? Now this is loaded.
It is loaded.
Right. Go off half cocked.
No, what you need to do now is you need to cock that gun. So pull that back.
Like this?
Yep.
Quite stiff.
Now up to your shoulder.
Am I going to fire this?
Yeah, you're going to fire it. Absolutely.
Is it going to come back and...
No.
Right, okay. What'll I aim at?
Aim at the sky.
I'll aim at the sky. Okay. I'm sure they're going to tell me there's something wrong with what I'm doing. You lied to me. You lied to me. You said there'd be no recoil. That scared the living daylights out of me.
Come on, there you go.
Whoa.
Do you want to see if our pistol will work?
I think I'll let you do the pistol just in case. What do you think?
I think you should have a go.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Right. That's even heavier, naturally, than this. But, I mean, were these used in battle only at close quarters, I would imagine?
At close quarters, there were, and it was normally officers that had those, or you know, people like yourself with a few bob, the gentry.
Well, tell you what, if this doesn't work, we'll have to resort to the swords after
To
this.
the cold
here.
steel.
And they're still coming at us, right?
Yep.
So am I doing this right?
You are
Straight out
perfect.
in front of me?
Now, this might be embarrassing for a reenactor, but it could have been lethal on the battlefield. Such mishaps were frequent and gave rise to a whole range of expressions that we use in everyday speech without knowing, perhaps, that they originated from such antique weaponry. Steve tells me I could have been half-cocked, or I might be a skinflint, and there are others.
So that's your cartridge,
cartridge,
right? You
right.
would have had a ball in that, right?
Right.
Like your little cannonball, as you said,
Okay.
right? So you bite the bullet.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, that's biting
Right?
the bullet.
That's biting the bullet.
Right, right.
You put some powder in here. Mm-hmm. You close your fizzle.
Right.
Now, the odd time you may have a problem where the little touch hole here, where the spark doesn't work and the powder doesn't go through,
Right.
and you'll get a little, which is a flash in the pan.
Oh, that's what that
That's
comes
where that
from.
comes from,
Really?
right?
I mean, it didn't amount to anything.
No, absolutely.
So it didn't fire. In
Didn't
other words.
fire.
Right.
So then you have your lock, stock, and barrel.
That's what that
In
comes
recognition of his ongoing contribution to Irish-French relations, in keeping alive the memory of this significant event in the history of both countries, and for his record of community involvement, Steve Dunford has this year been awarded the Médaille de la Jeunesse des Sports et de l'Engagement Associatif by the French government, a medal which is sometimes conferred on foreigners who have distinguished themselves in their chosen fields while bringing honour to France. Visitors from France, or anywhere else for that matter, who set foot in North Mayo for the first time will no doubt want to return with entirely peaceful intent. Because there's an extra dimension to natural light in this part of the world. There's sunlight, there's moonlight, there's starlight, and then there's Mayo light. More of which when we come back. When Dennis Quinn is conducting his foraging tours along the shorefront of Killala Bay, showing people how many of the seaweeds can be collected and eaten directly, or dried and then powdered to be used as seasoning in various soups and other dishes, it must be difficult to keep them gazing downwards at the rock pools when there's such a feast for the eyes if they simply lift their heads and turn in any and every other direction. Dennis is a native of Dublin, but he spent a considerable part of his childhood visiting an uncle in the west of Ireland, so he feels very much at home in Killala, where he's been living for much of the last 20 years. Yet he still has that fresh perspective of the blow-in, which he's happy to share with people like me who might be a bit overwhelmed by the lavish generosity of nature in furnishing this North Mayo coastline. Dennis reckoned that one of the best ways of seeing Killala Bay is to take a small boat out of Killala Harbour, out past the massive sandspit known as Bartra Island, and head due north a few miles in search of a place where the mackerel are congregating.
Like out in the bay here, you can get dolphins, sunfish, whale, fin whales, basking sharks now this time of the year. I don't see any today. Yeah.
Right. And you've these huge big sandy beaches.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody ever on them as well.
Yeah, it's a hidden secret.
Yeah.
You have little, for instance, there's a little beach over there now.
Yeah.
You rarely get anybody on it, you know.
Never get anybody on it at all.
The Blue Flag Beach in Killala itself, you know, in Ross. So that's on a sunny day, and people there, there's lifeguards and everything. But the other ones are beautiful, but they don't have the facilities. That's the only reason.
It's beautiful now today, but there's a huge difference when we're on here now in a sort of a calm area, But further out, I mean, where you were catching the mackerel, there was quite a swell, wasn't there?
Choppier, yeah. The wind was coming northwest.
Hey, well, listen, we hit the mother lode as far as the mackerel were concerned.
Few mackerel today, yeah.
The first place that Pádraig stopped was didn't seem to be doing anything, but you make up your minds very quickly as to whether
Yeah,
they're there.
there's
or
nothing
not.
doing in 5 minutes. You move.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Right.
We usually get the mackerel first, load up with mackerel for the supper, of course, and then for bait.
For bait as well.
And then you've got multiple species out here. It's fantastic fishing.
So what would you use the mackerel for bait? What would you?
Well, all sorts of
like
species.
everything?
Pollock, cod, ling,
Right.
flatfish.
And they'll all go for the mackerel as bait
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Right.
You can use sand eel as well, or
Right.
lugworm, different species,
Okay.
but mackerel is generally the best.
Aye. And so, does Pádraig know exactly where to go to catch
Yeah.
these mackerel?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because it all looks the same to me,
No.
But he must have a sort of
Well, you
notion
see,
of
you have
what's
different-
underneath.
Yeah, different terrains, like there's peaks, there's a wrecks. There's a wreck out there we usually go fishing on.
Right.
You get several species around the wreck.
And wrecks, you were saying to me earlier on, really, wrecks are kind of artificial reefs, really.
Yeah.
That's what happens,
But a
isn't
lot
it?
of them now, they've disintegrated over the years. There's only one out there at the moment that's spread out along the bottom of the sea,
Yeah.
But I was looking recently there from 1700, the records, 17 something, 47 wrecks in this bay.
47?
Yeah.
You're talking back in the days of sailing ships necessarily? Yeah.
As Killala was the port,
Yeah. But Killala strikes me now today as a quiet wee village. It's a beautiful spot, very tranquil.
Yeah.
But not as busy as it would have been in the past.
No, like I was reading Caesar Ottaway's report or
Yes,
whatever like that,
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that, back in the 1850s, and he was talking about how many taverns was there, and blacksmiths, whitesmiths, haberdasheries,
Whitesmiths as well. So there's still a bit of blacksmithing going on at
There
the
is,
moment,
yeah.
anyway. And that's
Yeah, there's
our
recently-
friend Ray. We're
That's
gonna
right,
visit
He's
later on.
40 odd years, yeah.
That would be our friend Ray Munley we're talking about. Ray's that rare breed, a Ballina blacksmith who doesn't make pikes. Mind you, that's about the only thing he doesn't make, judging by the contents of his forge. Believe it or not, Ray has made most of the objects you can see here, including the tools. And it's a wonder he ever sold anything at all, I told him, because he collects more than he parts with. Ray started his career as a fisherman, but a childhood spent hanging about blacksmiths' forges gave him a taste for making things with iron that became a kind of obsession. If the devil makes work for idle hands, then he's entirely redundant in Ray's company, because this man never stops. I was no sooner in the door than he handed me something he was just after hammering into shape.
It took me a while to realise what it actually was. In fact, I thought it was your initials was on it at the start. My own initialed bottle opener or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah,
So it goes like that?
Yeah. No,
No?
like,
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Right. It's for opening beer bottles.
Yeah,
It's a terrible pity I don't drink at all, isn't it? I'll find a use for it
you will,
somehow or other.
you will.
And the other thing you've made, what you were showing me earlier on behind us here, these vicious-looking things here.
Yeah,
And these,
yeah.
believe it or not, are
they're spikes.
spikes or nails.
Yeah. They done a big job on the cathedral.
In Ballina?
Yeah.
They had to replace the nails that were already there. Is that the idea?
Well, there was a lot of them, kind of gone,
Yeah.
But they wanted to use the same type of nail
They
as
wanted
there
it.
was there originally, like.
They wanted it to be authentic and other
Yeah,
words. Is that the
yeah,
idea?
yeah.
So that was the original kind of nails they were using hundreds of years ago.
That's right, yeah.
And a blacksmith would have made those original
Oh,
nails,
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
They're seriously long, aren't they?
Yeah. Will I put a head on one of those?
I was going to say,
Yeah.
you would need a head on that.
Oh,
for it
Can
to-
will I just?
Please do.
Aye,
Oh,
I
aye.
will.
Oh, aye. Because you're still working on these ones, in other
Aye.
words, right? Right.
Stick a head on one of them. Put that in your pocket, Julian.
I will.
There you go, I'll stick a head on.
So basically what you're going to do is squash
Exactly,
it
upset
down.
it, upset it.
Upset it. That's the word you use. Upset it.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I didn't realise that was a blacksmith term at all now.
Is
I'll know what upsetting means from now on. It means being hit with a hammer. I see what you mean now.
no. We'll flatten the head on it.
Flatten it properly.
See the little, the little sprinkler,
Yeah.
just to keep it. You know what I mean? Like, Just run it around like that.
That keeps it from spreading too far.
Yeah, and burning out too quick.
I see.
And it actually turns the coal to
Right.
coke.
All right, the whole way down. You've actually put a wee point on it. Is that? Oh, I see now. Right.
It's not too bad.
Oh, very good. Pleased enough with that one.
Oh, yeah.
And that's basically the same way that a man working back in medieval times
Yeah.
would have made that.
Oh, yeah,
exactly
yeah,
the same
yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
People done nothing else years ago. Only, just making nails.
Making nails. I
Yeah.
suppose you get asked to make a lot of things.
You do, yeah.
And it takes a man for
Yeah.
a lot of explaining to tell you
Yeah,
what
yeah,
exactly
yeah.
he means.
You get a lot of guys explaining it's that long and
And,
it's
that's
this
just
wide.
big. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually a very, very nice object in its own
The
right.
thickest ones, there was other ones in.
Yeah. And that would be driven on the full length as well.
Yeah, well, I presume it'd be, what you call them, it'd be a starter hole.
They started off
I'd
with.
say so, yeah.
And they had to go and get every single nail replaced in the cathedral.
Yeah,
And
well,
that's
it was the end of the rafters. See, where the rafters were going into the walls.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They kind of rotted away there, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And they came to use it. The very man who loves very handy here, and he's going to do them. And how many did you actually end up making?
it was a couple of thousand and he was like, yeah.
And every one of them made the way you made that one there.
Yeah.
It's just as well then that Ray Munnelly loves working with iron. Mind you, he also loves crab claws roasted over a coke fire. And, as I discovered, so do I.